Racist bus driver shouts at Snoop Dogg, but what happened next shocked everyone. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the bustling city streets as people hurried to and fro, each immersed in their own lives. The number 23 bus screeched to a stop at the corner of Jefferson and Main, its doors hissing open to let passengers board. Among them was a man wearing a baseball cap and casual jacket, his demeanor calm and easygoing. It was none other than Snoop Dogg, though most of the people around him seemed too preoccupied to notice. He liked it that way. Riding public transportation gave him a rare chance to blend in, to just be himself. As he stepped onto the bus, Snoop offered the driver a polite nod and reached for his fare. The driver, an older man with a rigid posture and a name tag reading, Willis, glanced up, his face twisting into a scowl. "Hey," the driver barked. "You can't just waltz in here without paying like everyone else." Snoop raised an eyebrow, unfazed by the hostility. "Relax, man. I'm just getting my card out," he said, pulling his transit pass from his pocket. But the driver wasn't done. "People like you think you can do whatever you want, huh?" he muttered loud enough for the other passengers to hear. No respect for rules. The bus fell silent, the air suddenly thick with tension. Snoop froze for a moment, processing the implication behind the driver's words. He could feel the eyes of the other passengers on him, some curious, others uncomfortable. Still he kept his cool. "People like me?" Snoop repeated, his tone measured but sharp. "What's that supposed to mean?" The driver scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You know exactly what I mean," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Now, hurry up and take a seat. You're holding everyone up." Snoop stared at the driver for a beat, his face unreadable. Then, with a shrug, he swiped his card and moved to the back of the bus, where a young woman offered him an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," she whispered. Snoop smiled back, his easygoing demeanor returning. "It's all good," he said. "Some people just gotta learn the hard way." The bus continued its route, the atmosphere tense but quiet. Most of the passengers avoided eye contact with the driver, unwilling to get involved. But Snoop, ever the observer, noticed the subtle exchanges of glances and whispers. It was clear that many of them shared his unease. At the next stop, a mother and her young son boarded the bus. The boy, no more than 6 years old, beamed as he held up a toy microphone, clearly excited about something. "Look, Mommy," he said, pointing at Snoop. "It's the man from TV." The mother looked embarrassed, shushing her son gently. "That's enough, sweetheart. Let's find a seat." Snoop chuckled, tipping his cap to the boy. "What's up, little man? You a fan of the Dogfather?" The boy's eyes lit up. "You're Snoop Dogg. My dad plays your music all the time." Snoop leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone. "Well, you tell your dad he's got good taste." The interaction brought a brief moment of levity to the bus, with a few passengers chuckling softly. But the driver, clearly still agitated, glanced in the rearview mirror and muttered something under his breath. "What's that?" Snoop called out, his voice carrying over the hum of the engine. "You got something to say, my man?" The driver bristled, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I said, people like you don't belong here. You think you're special, but you're just another troublemaker." This time, the murmurs among the passengers grew louder. A middle-aged man near the front turned to the driver, his expression one of disbelief. "Hey man, that's uncalled for," he said. "Why don't you just do your job and drive?" The driver glared at the man but said nothing, his jaw set in frustration. Snoop, meanwhile, leaned back in his seat, his calm exterior masking the anger simmering beneath the surface. As the bus approached its next stop, Snoop noticed a group of teenagers waiting on the sidewalk. They were laughing and joking, their energy infectious. When the bus doors opened, one of them spotted Snoop and froze, his eyes widening in recognition. "Yo, is that Snoop Dogg?" the boy exclaimed, nudging his friends. "No way." Snoop grinned, raising a hand in greeting. "What's up, fellas?" The teens piled onto the bus, their excitement filling the space. One of them pulled out his phone, angling it for a selfie. "Can I get a picture with you, Mr. Dogg?" "Sure thing," Snoop said, leaning in as the boy snapped the photo. The driver, however, was less than thrilled. "This isn't a circus," he snapped. "Take your seats and stop causing a scene." The teens exchanged uncertain glances, their excitement dampened by the driver's harsh tone. Snoop, sensing their discomfort, stood up and addressed the driver directly. "Hey man, what's your problem?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. "These kids are just having a good time. No need to be rude." The driver turned in his seat, his face red with anger. "My problem is people like you who think you can do whatever you want, disrupting my bus. I've had enough of it." Snoop took a step forward, his presence commanding but non-threatening. "Listen, I don't know what's got you so wound up, but you need to check yourself," he said. "These people paid to be here, same as anyone else. You don't get to treat them like this." The driver opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, an older woman near the back of the bus stood up. "He's right," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "We've all seen how you've been acting today, and it's unacceptable. This man has done nothing wrong, and neither have these kids. You owe everyone here an apology." The bus erupted into a chorus of agreement, with passengers speaking up one by one. The driver, clearly overwhelmed, sat back in his seat, his face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. The tension lingered as the bus continued on its route, but Snoop's calm demeanor helped to diffuse it. He returned to his seat, offering reassuring smiles to the passengers around him. The young boy from earlier tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering something in her ear. She nodded, and the boy approached Snoop shyly. "Thank you for standing up to the driver," he said. "That was really cool." Snoop smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Sometimes you gotta stand up for what's right, little man," he said. "Never be afraid to do that." As the bus neared its final stop, the atmosphere had shifted. The passengers, once silent and uncomfortable, now chatted and laughed, their spirits lifted by Snoop's presence. Even the teenagers, who had been momentarily deflated, were back to their energetic selves, snapping photos and sharing stories. When the bus finally pulled to a stop, Snoop stood up, addressing the passengers with a grin. "Y'all take care now, all right? Stay positive and keep spreading the love." The bus erupted into applause as he stepped off, the sound following him as he walked down the street. Snoop knew he couldn't change everyone's mind or fix every problem, but in that moment, he felt like he'd made a difference. As Snoop stepped off the bus, the applause behind him slowly faded, but the energy lingered in the air. Passers-by on the street paused, some recognizing him and pulling out their phones to capture the moment. Snoop acknowledged them with his signature cool nod, but his mind was still on what had just happened. The driver's words echoed in his head, but they weren't what lingered most. It was the courage of the other passengers who had spoken up that stuck with him. He walked a few blocks, needing to clear his head. The city buzzed around him as cars honked and people hurried past, but Snoop took his time, breathing in the moment. It wasn't the first time he'd encountered prejudice, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. Still, every time, it struck a nerve. As he turned the corner, a young woman rushed up to him, slightly out of breath. "Mr. Dogg," she called, clutching her phone. "Sorry to bother you, but I was on the bus just now. I just wanted to say, what you did back there, standing up to that driver, that meant a lot. People like me, we deal with that kind of thing all the time. Seeing someone like you call it out, it gives us hope." Snoop gave her a small smile, his usual laid-back demeanor softening. "Appreciate you saying that," he said. "It ain't always easy, but sometimes you gotta speak up when you see something wrong. We all deserve respect, no matter who we are." The woman nodded, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for being you," she said before walking away, leaving Snoop to ponder her words. As he continued down the street, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw a flood of notifications. Apparently, someone on the bus had recorded the incident and posted it online. The video was already going viral, with thousands of comments praising Snoop for his composure and for standing up to the driver. He chuckled to himself, shaking his head. "Man, the internet don't waste no time," he muttered. While he appreciated the support, he wasn't one for basking in the spotlight of viral fame. For him, it wasn't about attention, it was about doing what felt right in the moment. Still, the video was picking up steam. News outlets were already reaching out, and his phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues who had seen it. Among them was one from his longtime friend Martha Stewart. "I just saw what happened on that bus," she texted. "You handled it with such grace. Proud of you as always. Let me know if you want to chat." Snoop smiled, quickly typing a response. "Appreciate you, Martha. Always good to hear from you. Let's catch up soon." Later that evening, Snoop sat in his living room, scrolling through the reactions to the video. It was heartening to see so many people sharing their own stories, drawing inspiration from what had happened. Some shared experiences of standing up to discrimination, while others admitted they wished they had spoken up in similar situations. One comment in particular caught his eye. What Snoop did on that bus today wasn't just about him, it was about all of us. He reminded us that we have the power to speak up and make a difference. Respect to the Dogfather. It got Snoop thinking. The incident on the bus had sparked a conversation, but what if it could lead to something bigger? What if he could use his platform to amplify the voices of those who faced similar struggles every day? He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Yo, Jimmy," he said when the call connected. "I got an idea. Let's set up a campaign, something to shine a light on everyday folks who stand up for what's right. Call it, I don't know, Stand Up Strong or something. Think you can make that happen?" Jimmy, one of Snoop's close associates, didn't hesitate. "You know I'm on it, Snoop. Consider it done." Within days, the Stand Up Strong campaign was in full swing. Social media lit up with stories of people standing up against injustice in their communities, from students defending classmates from bullies to strangers helping others in need. Snoop used his own platform to share these stories, encouraging his followers to take action in their own lives. The campaign gained traction quickly, with celebrities and influencers joining in to support the cause. News outlets covered the movement, highlighting the ripple effect of Snoop's actions on that bus. It was a reminder that even small acts of courage could inspire change. Meanwhile, the Transit Authority issued a public statement, acknowledging the incident and promising to address concerns about discrimination among their staff. The driver from the bus was suspended pending an investigation, and the organization pledged to implement sensitivity training for all employees. For Snoop, it wasn't about getting the driver punished, it was about accountability and ensuring that others wouldn't have to face similar treatment. He hoped the changes would make a difference, not just for himself but for everyone who used public transportation. Weeks later, Snoop found himself back on a bus, not the same one, but a similar route through the city. This time, he wasn't alone. He had invited a group of young fans who had written to him during the campaign, sharing their own stories of courage and resilience. As they rode through the city, Snoop listened intently to their stories. One girl, no older than 10, spoke about standing up to a bully at her school who had been picking on her little brother. A teenage boy shared how he had organized a protest at his high school to demand better resources for students with disabilities. "You kids are something else," Snoop said, his voice full of admiration. "Y'all are the real MVPs, keep doing what you're doing, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The ride ended at a local community center, where Snoop had arranged a special event to celebrate the Stand Up Strong campaign. The room was packed with people of all ages, each with their own story to tell. Snoop took the stage, addressing the crowd with his signature charm. "Y'all know me as Snoop Dogg," he began, "but today ain't about me. It's about us, all of us. We all got a role to play in making this world a better place. It starts with speaking up, standing tall, and showing love. So let's keep it going, you feel me?" The crowd erupted into cheers, the energy in the room electric. For Snoop, it was a moment of pride, not just for what he had accomplished but for what they had all accomplished together. As the event wound down, a man approached Snoop, his face familiar. It was the driver from the bus. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "Mr. Dogg," he began, his voice quiet. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what I said, for how I acted. It was wrong and I see that now." Snoop studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Takes a lot to admit when you're wrong," he said. "What matters is what you do from here. Be better. Treat people with respect." The driver nodded, his expression earnest. "I will. Thank you for giving me a chance." As the man walked away, Snoop felt a sense of closure. The incident had been painful, but it had also sparked something bigger, something that would hopefully leave a lasting impact. And as he left the community center that evening, surrounded by people who believed in the power of standing up and speaking out, Snoop couldn't help but smile. The journey wasn't over, but it was one worth taking. The community center event was just the beginning. Snoop found himself at the center of a growing movement, one that was gaining momentum far beyond his initial expectations. News outlets covered the Stand Up Strong campaign daily, sharing stories of people standing up for what's right in every corner of the country. What started as a simple moment of confrontation on a bus had become a nationwide phenomenon. Snoop's team worked tirelessly to organize events, fundraisers, and workshops aimed at empowering individuals to take action in their communities. The campaign wasn't just about raising awareness, it was about equipping people with the tools they needed to create real change. Whether it was hosting seminars on conflict resolution or providing resources for grassroots organizers, Stand Up Strong became a beacon of hope for many. Despite the campaign's success, Snoop remained humble. To him, it wasn't about being in the spotlight, it was about the impact. That's why, when an elementary school in South Central Los Angeles invited him to speak at their annual anti-bullying rally, he didn't hesitate to say yes. The school auditorium was packed, the air buzzing with excitement. Children waved handmade signs that read, "Stop the hate" and "Be kind to everyone." Teachers stood along the edges of the room, their faces lit with anticipation. When Snoop walked onto the stage, the cheers were deafening. He raised his hands to calm the crowd, a smile spreading across his face. All right, I see y'all," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the noise. "First off, let me say thank you for having me here. Y'all are looking fresh today." The kids laughed and cheered, their energy infectious. Snoop took a moment to soak it in before continuing. "I'm here today because I want to talk about something real important," he said. "We all got a choice every day, to lift people up or to tear 'em down. Now, I ain't perfect. I've made mistakes just like everyone else. But one thing I've learned is that it's never too late to do the right thing." He shared the story of what had happened on the bus, making sure to emphasize the courage of the passengers who had spoken up. "It wasn't just about me," he said. "It was about all of us standing together, saying, enough is enough. And y'all can do the same. Whether it's in your classroom, on the playground, or anywhere else, if you see something wrong, speak up." As he spoke, Snoop noticed a boy in the front row listening intently. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 9 years old, had a serious expression on his face, as if every word Snoop said was sinking deep into his soul. After the rally, the boy approached Snoop hesitantly. "Mr. Dogg," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I get picked on a lot at school. Kids make fun of me because I talk different. But when you said to stand up for yourself, it made me feel like maybe I can." Snoop knelt down to the boy's level, looking him in the eye. "Listen here, little man," he said gently. "Ain't nobody got the right to make you feel small. You're strong, you're smart, and you're important. Don't ever forget that. And if someone's messing with you, you tell an adult. You hear me?" The boy nodded, his eyes welling with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll try." Snoop ruffled the boy's hair, giving him a warm smile. "You're gonna be all right, kid. I got faith in you." Word of the rally spread quickly, and soon Snoop found himself inundated with requests to visit schools, community centers, and even city council meetings. Though his schedule was packed, he made time for as many as he could. Each visit reaffirmed his belief in the power of collective action. Everywhere he went, he met people who were inspired to make a difference because of the movement he had started. One such meeting was with a group of high school students who had organized a peaceful protest against racial profiling in their community. The students, many of whom were from underprivileged backgrounds, had faced significant pushback from local authorities, but they refused to back down. When Snoop arrived to meet them, they greeted him with cheers and applause. One of the students, a girl named Maya, stepped forward to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Dogg," she said. "Your campaign gave us the courage to stand up for what we believe in." Snoop nodded, his respect for the students evident. "Y'all are the real heroes," he said. "What you're doing takes guts. Keep pushing, and don't let anyone silence you." Maya smiled, her determination shining through. "We won't," she said. We're not just doing this for us. We're doing it for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly. As the months went on, the Stand Up Strong campaign evolved into a fully fledged nonprofit organization. With Snoop at the helm, the organization launched programs aimed at addressing systemic issues like inequality, bullying, and discrimination. They partnered with schools, businesses, and local governments to create lasting change, one community at a time. But for all the progress being made, Snoop knew there was still work to be done. That's why, when he was invited to speak at a national conference on social justice, he accepted without hesitation. The conference, held in a sprawling convention center, was attended by activists, leaders, and influencers from across the country. As Snoop took the stage, the audience erupted into applause, their excitement palpable. He began his speech with a story, one that had stuck with him ever since the incident on the bus. There was this moment, he said, when I looked around and saw all those people standing up, speaking out against what was happening. That's when I realized something. Change don't start with one person. It starts with all of us, working together. He spoke about the power of community, the importance of empathy, and the need for courage in the face of adversity. By the time he finished, the audience was on their feet, their applause a testament to the impact of his words. After the conference, Snoop was approached by a man in a suit, his expression serious but kind. "Mr. Dogg," the man said, extending his hand, "I'm with the governor's office. We've been following your campaign, and we'd like to discuss the possibility of partnering on a statewide initiative." Snoop shook the man's hand, a smile spreading across his face. "Let's make it happen," he said. The partnership marked a new chapter for the Stand Up Strong campaign. With the backing of state resources, they were able to expand their reach, launching programs that impacted millions of lives. From training workshops for teachers to grants for community projects, the initiative became a model for how grassroots movements could affect meaningful change. Through it all, Snoop remained as grounded as ever. Whether he was speaking at a conference or chatting with fans on the street, he never lost sight of what mattered most, using his platform to uplift others. And as he stood on a stage one evening, addressing a crowd of thousands, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The journey had been unexpected, but it had been worth every step. Snoop had set out to make a difference, and he had succeeded, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in the power of standing up and speaking out. Snoop found himself busier than ever. The statewide partnership with the governor's office had taken the Stand Up Strong campaign to new heights, but it also meant countless meetings, events, and speaking engagements. Despite his packed schedule, Snoop made a point to stay hands-on. He wasn't content to simply lend his name to the cause. He wanted to be in the trenches, making a real difference. One afternoon, Snoop visited a local youth center that had recently received funding from the campaign. The center, located in a neighborhood plagued by poverty and violence, was a lifeline for many of the kids who spent their afternoons there. It offered tutoring, meals, and a safe space to escape the challenges of the streets. When Snoop arrived, the kids erupted into cheers. They swarmed around him, asking for autographs and selfies, their excitement contagious. Snoop grinned, taking his time to talk to each of them, asking about their lives and their dreams. He eventually sat down with the center's director, a woman named Angela who had dedicated her life to helping at-risk youth. "We're so grateful for the support," she said. "This funding has allowed us to expand our programs and reach more kids than ever before. It's making a real difference." Snoop nodded, his expression serious. "That's what it's all about," he said. "Giving these kids a chance to see what's possible. Letting them know they're worth it." Angela smiled. "You're an inspiration to them, you know. Just seeing someone like you, someone who's been through struggles and come out on top, it gives them hope." Snoop glanced around the room, watching the kids laugh and play. "They're the real inspiration," he said. "They've got so much potential. They just need someone to believe in." Later that evening, Snoop sat in his home studio, reflecting on the day. The visit to the youth center had left him feeling both hopeful and determined. He thought about his own upbringing, the challenges he had faced, and the people who had believed in him when he needed it most. He wanted to be that person for these kids. Inspired, Snoop began brainstorming ideas for a new project. something that could combine his love for music with his passion for mentorship. As he jotted down notes, an idea began to take shape: a nationwide music program for underprivileged youth. The program would provide instruments, training, and performance opportunities for kids who might not otherwise have access to music education. Snoop reached out to his team the next morning, excitedly sharing his vision. "I'm calling it Notes for Change," he said. "Music saved my life, and I know it can do the same for these kids. Let's make it happen." His team sprang into action, reaching out to schools, community centers, and music organizations across the country. Within weeks, Notes for Change was officially launched, with the first wave of programs rolling out in 10 cities. The program was an instant success. Kids who had never held an instrument before discovered hidden talents and newfound confidence. Parents and teachers marveled at the transformation, noting how the program had given the children a sense of purpose and pride. One of the standout participants was a 14-year-old boy named Marcus, who had joined the program at his school in Chicago. Marcus had always been quiet and withdrawn, struggling to find his place in a world that often felt overwhelming. But when he picked up a guitar for the first time, something clicked. Within weeks, Marcus was writing his own songs and performing for his classmates. His talent was undeniable, and it wasn't long before Snoop heard about him. When Snoop visited Marcus's school to see the program in action, he made a point to seek the boy out. Marcus was shy at first, but as he played one of his original songs for Snoop, his confidence grew. By the time he finished, the entire room was silent, the power of his music hanging in the air. Snoop clapped, his smile wide. "Man, you've got something special," he said. "Keep doing what you're doing, and the sky's the limit." Marcus beamed, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Dogg. This program, it's changed my life." As the months went on, Notes for Change grew, reaching thousands of kids across the country. Snoop traveled tirelessly, visiting schools and community centers, performing with the kids and sharing his own story. The program became a cornerstone of the Stand Up Strong campaign, demonstrating the power of art and creativity to inspire change. But for Snoop, the work wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about the kids, their stories, their triumphs, and their potential. Each success story fueled his determination to keep going, to keep building a legacy that was about more than music or fame. One evening, Snoop received a call from Angela, the director of the youth center he had visited months earlier. Her voice was filled with excitement as she shared the news that one of the kids from the center had been accepted into a prestigious college on a full scholarship. "It's all because of the support you provided," Angela said. "You gave him the confidence to believe in himself." Snoop smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "That's what we're here for," he said. "Tell him I'm proud of him." After hanging up, Snoop sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the impact of his journey. He thought about the incident on the bus that had sparked it all, the passengers who had spoken up, and the movement that had grown from that single moment of courage. It was a reminder that even the smallest actions could create ripples of change. As the years went by, Snoop's efforts continued to expand, touching countless lives. The Stand Up Strong campaign became a global movement, inspiring people around the world to take a stand against injustice and inequality. Notes for Change grew into one of the largest music education programs in the country, producing talented young artists who went on to make their mark in the industry. Through it all, Snoop remained as dedicated and humble as ever. He never lost sight of the people who had supported him along the way, from his family and friends to the fans who had believed in him from the beginning. And he never stopped striving to make the world a better place, one step at a time. On a quiet evening years after the movement began, Snoop stood on a stage in front of a packed auditorium. The event was a celebration of everything the Stand Up Strong campaign had accomplished, and the room was filled with people whose lives had been touched by the movement. As Snoop looked out at the crowd, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. Taking a deep breath, he stepped up to the microphone. "This right here," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "this ain't about me. It's about us. It's about what we can do when we come together, when we stand up for what's right, and when we believe in each other." Y'all are the reason this movement exists, and I'm just proud to be a part of it." The audience erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the room. For Snoop, it wasn't the end of the journey, it was just another step forward. And as he stood there, surrounded by the people who had made it all possible, he couldn't help but smile. The future was bright, and he was ready to keep building it, one act of courage at a time. Months after the celebratory event, Snoop found himself in a reflective mood. The success of the Stand Up Strong campaign and the Notes for Change program had surpassed even his wildest dreams. His days were now filled with meetings, performances, and visits to schools and communities across the country. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to do, more change to inspire. One quiet morning, as he sat in his backyard sipping coffee and watching the sun rise, an idea began to take shape. He had been thinking a lot about the people who hadn't yet found their voices, those who were still afraid to stand up for themselves or others. What if there was a way to reach them? To empower them before they even realized their own strength? Later that day, he called his team together for a brainstorming session. "All right, y'all," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "We've done a lot of good work so far, but I want to take it to the next level. I'm talking about something big, something that's gonna reach people where they're at and give them the tools to stand up for what's right." His team listened intently as Snoop laid out his vision for a nationwide workshop series. The workshops would be hosted in cities and towns across the country, offering free training in conflict resolution, public speaking, and community organizing. They would also include storytelling sessions, where participants could share their own experiences and learn from one another. "We'll call it the Voices Rising Tour," Snoop said, his excitement growing as he spoke. "It's not just about teaching people how to stand up, it's about showing them they already have the power inside them." His team was immediately on board, and within weeks, the first workshops were scheduled. The tour kicked off in Atlanta, a city known for its rich history of activism and resilience. The auditorium was packed with people of all ages and backgrounds. Some were there out of curiosity, while others were seeking guidance on how to address the challenges in their communities. Snoop stood at the front of the room, wearing his signature calm confidence, but there was a new energy in his demeanor, one of deep purpose. "Welcome, everybody," he began, his voice steady and warm. "I'm glad y'all could make it. We're here today to talk about something real important, how to use your voice to make a difference. Each and every one of y'all has the power to create change. You just gotta believe in yourself and be willing to take that first step." The room buzzed with anticipation as the first session began. Participants were divided into small groups, each led by a trained facilitator who guided them through exercises designed to build confidence and communication skills. They practiced speaking up in challenging situations, brainstorming solutions to common problems, and supporting one another through constructive feedback. In one group, a young woman named Kayla shared her story of overcoming bullying in her high school. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, her confidence grew. "I used to think I wasn't strong enough to stand up for myself," she said. "But then I realized that staying silent only gave my bullies more power. Speaking up was hard, but it changed everything." Her words resonated deeply with the group, and by the end of the session, several participants had shared their own stories, inspired by Kayla's bravery. As the tour continued, Snoop traveled from city to city, witnessing firsthand the impact of the workshops. Each stop brought new faces, new stories, and new opportunities to spark change. In Chicago, he met a father who had been inspired to organize a neighborhood watch program to keep his community safe. In Houston, a group of teens started a petition to improve their school's mental health resources. And in New York, a young man who had struggled with homelessness found the courage to share his story publicly, raising awareness about the challenges faced by those without stable housing. Snoop was deeply moved by the ripple effect of the tour. It reminded him of the bus incident that had started it all and the power of one small act of courage to inspire a movement. He knew that these workshops were planting seeds of change in communities across the country, and he was determined to keep the momentum going. One particularly memorable moment came during a workshop in Los Angeles. A man in his late 40s stood up during the storytelling session, his hands trembling as he gripped the microphone. "I've been quiet my whole life," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I grew up in a family where speaking out wasn't allowed. Even when I saw things that weren't right, I stayed silent because I was afraid. But being here today, hearing all of your stories, it's made me realize that it's never too late to find your voice. The room erupted into applause, and Snoop stepped forward, clapping along with the crowd. That's what it's all about, he said, his voice full of encouragement. It's never too late to stand up and make a difference. You've already taken the first step, my man. Keep going. As the Voices Rising tour gained national attention, Snoop found himself being invited to speak at major events and conferences. One of the most significant invitations came from the United Nations, which was hosting a global summit on human rights and social justice. Snoop was asked to deliver the keynote address, an opportunity he didn't take lightly. Standing on the stage at the UN headquarters, Snoop looked out at the audience of world leaders, activists, and changemakers. It was a far cry from the streets of Long Beach where he had grown up, but he felt a deep sense of purpose as he began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice resonating through the hall, change starts with us. It starts with the decisions we make every day, the way we treat each other, and the example we set for the next generation. We all have a responsibility to stand up for what's right, no matter where we come from or what we've been through. He shared the story of the bus incident, the campaign that had grown from it, and the countless lives that had been touched along the way. He spoke about the importance of empathy, courage, and community, urging the audience to take action in their own lives. By the time he finished, the room was on its feet, the applause thunderous. For Snoop, it wasn't about personal accolades. It was about spreading a message of hope and empowerment to as many people as possible. Back home, Snoop reflected on the journey so far. The past few years had been a whirlwind of growth, challenges, and triumphs. He had gone from being a witness to injustice on a city bus to leading a global movement for change. And while he was proud of what he had accomplished, he knew the work was far from over. Sitting in his backyard once again, he thought about the future. He envisioned a world where everyone had the tools and confidence to stand up for themselves and others. A world where kindness and respect were the norm, not the exception. And as he watched the sun dip below the horizon, Snoop smiled. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain: as long as there was work to be done, he'd be there, standing strong. Months after the United Nations Summit, Snoop's vision for a kinder, stronger world was evolving. The Voices Rising tour had proven to be one of the most impactful initiatives of his career, with people in towns and cities across the nation continuing the work long after the workshops had concluded. Communities were forming alliances, schools were integrating anti-bullying and conflict resolution programs, and individuals who had once felt voiceless were stepping forward to create change. But Snoop wasn't slowing down. He had begun planning the next phase of his movement, one that would involve reaching global audiences. His team, now a well-oiled machine of passionate individuals, had spent months developing a digital platform called Voices Rising Worldwide. It would be a hub where anyone, anywhere, could access tools for activism, share stories, and connect with others who shared their vision. The platform launched with a live virtual event, and Snoop kicked it off with his trademark mix of humor and heart. "All right, y'all," he said, addressing viewers from his home studio, "we've been making moves here in the US, but now it's time to take this thing global. No matter where you're from, no matter what language you speak, we all got one thing in common: the power to make a difference. So let's get to it." The platform immediately gained traction, with thousands of people signing up within the first few hours. From small villages in Africa to bustling cities in Europe, stories began pouring in from individuals who were standing up for their communities. Snoop spent hours reading through the submissions, moved by the courage and resilience of people he had never met. One story that caught his eye came from a young woman named Aisha in Kenya. She had organized a group of local women to advocate for education rights in her village, where girls were often denied access to school. Her group had faced significant opposition, but they had persevered, eventually convincing local leaders to support their cause. Snoop reached out to Aisha directly, arranging a video call to learn more about her work. "Aisha," he said, smiling as her face appeared on the screen, "you're doing something real powerful over there. Tell me more about how you got started." Aisha spoke with passion, explaining how she had been inspired by the Stand Up Strong campaign to take action in her own community. "I realized that if I didn't speak up, no one else would," she said. "It hasn't been easy, but seeing the girls in our village go to school for the first time, it's worth everything." Snoop nodded, deeply moved. "You're a leader, Aisha," he said. "Keep doing what you're doing, and know that we've got your back." The success of the digital platform only fueled Snoop's determination. He began collaborating with international organizations, leveraging his platform to shine a light on issues like poverty, climate change, and social inequality. Through partnerships with nonprofits and grassroots groups, he was able to amplify the voices of people who were often overlooked. One of the most ambitious projects was a documentary series called Voices of Change, which followed individuals and communities around the world who were fighting for justice and equality. Snoop served as the executive producer and narrator, lending his voice to the stories of unsung heroes making a difference in their own unique ways. The series premiered on a major streaming platform, and the response was overwhelming. Critics praised its authenticity and emotional depth, while viewers flooded social media with messages of support and gratitude. "Yo, Snoop," one fan wrote on Twitter, "this docuseries got me in my feels. Makes you realize how much power we all have to do good. Respect." Snoop retweeted the message with a simple reply, "One love. Let's keep it going." As the years went by, Snoop's movement continued to grow. He remained deeply involved, traveling to new places, meeting new people, and sharing his message of hope and empowerment. But amidst the global impact, he never lost sight of the individual moments that made it all worthwhile. One day, while visiting a small town in Mississippi, Snoop met a teenager named Jamal who had recently started a mentorship program for younger kids in his neighborhood. Jamal had been inspired by Snoop's story and wanted to pay it forward by helping others. "Man, I used to get in all kinds of trouble," Jamal admitted, scratching the back of his head. "But then I saw what you were doing, standing up, making a difference, and I thought, why not me? If you can change, maybe I can too." Snoop smiled, placing a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You already changed, my man," he said. "Taking care of these kids, showing 'em a better way, that's what it's all about." Jamal grinned, his confidence growing. "Thanks, Mr. Dogg. That means a lot." Back in Los Angeles, Snoop continued to balance his activism with his music career. He released an album inspired by his journey, with tracks that blended his signature style with powerful messages about resilience and unity. The album, titled Stand Tall, debuted at the top of the charts, proving that Snoop's influence extended far beyond one medium. Fans and critics alike praised the album for its authenticity and heart. One track, Rise Up, became an anthem for the movement, with its infectious beat and lyrics that urged listeners to take action in their own lives. Snoop performed the song at events around the world, often inviting local activists and community leaders to join him on stage. Each performance was a celebration of the collective power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. As his movement approached its 10th anniversary, Snoop organized a massive event in Los Angeles to celebrate everything they had accomplished. The event, called Voices Rising Live, featured performances, speeches, and storytelling sessions from people whose lives had been impacted by the campaign. The highlight of the evening was a surprise performance by Snoop himself. Standing on stage in front of thousands of supporters, he performed Rise Up, his voice filled with emotion as the crowd sang along. After the performance, Snoop addressed the audience, his tone both humble and determined. "Y'all, this has been one of the most incredible journeys of my life," he said. "But this ain't about me. It's about all of us, every single person who stood up, spoken out, and made a difference. We've come a long way, but there's still more to do. So let's keep building, keep rising, and keep standing strong." The crowd erupted into cheers, the energy palpable. For Snoop, it was a moment of reflection and gratitude. He knew that the work they had done together was just the beginning, and he was ready to keep pushing forward. In the years that followed, Snoop's legacy as both an artist and an activist only grew. He remained a tireless advocate for change, using his platform to uplift others and inspire hope. And while the challenges were many, he faced them with the same determination and resilience that had carried him through his entire journey. As he often said, it's all about love, unity, and standing up for what's right. That's how we change the world. And in the eyes of millions, that's exactly what he had done.